Hey, good morning. Well, good to see you all too, all right? So we are going to try something a little bit out of the ordinary today. We are going to report a little bit on what our Africa trip accomplished. And part of the reason we're going to do that is because the more and more I reflect on this trip to Kenya and to work with the Get to Through, the community school that we partner with and have partnered with since 2011, there's going to be some lasting lessons that I think are going to just affect us as we continue to lead in this church and figure out what God's leading us toward and how He's leading us. And so I wanted to make sure that we took a day as kind of a defining day, a defining moment to learn the lessons that we learned. And it's important for us to do that, all right? Before I get going, you know we're in the middle of kind of a church capital campaign, and I just want to say this week. We kind of hit you hard last week, right? Last 2 weeks, maybe last month, right? You're getting sick and tired of it, right? I get it, all right? I changed my radio station recently because I couldn't handle the pledge drive, all right? And so I was like, I get it, all right? But this is all I want to tell you. It's so true. When we take steps, God moves ahead of us. And April 7th, we're going to report on all that God has done that literally none of us are good enough and talented enough to accomplish on our own. I love hearing the stories that some of you have communicated with me about what's going on in your own life, in your own heart. I've heard grow group stories just about what's happening. And the reality is this: none of us are that talented. None of us are that good. And so on April 7th, when we celebrate, we're going to celebrate what God does, because only God can accomplish some of the things that are being accomplished. Make sense? And so that's even in the heart today. I'm going to invite the Africa team, those of them who are here today, just to kind of come and sit out here. I'm going to share one. You don't have to clap for them now. You're going to hear from them. This is our clapping. Just because your daughter's out there, I mean, come on, you know? All right, clap. All right, clap for them. All right, there you go. I always tell people this is our rowdy service, and so try to just keep it a little calm, all right? Good. So, back to the lesson I was going to share with you, all right? And I want you to write these down, all right? If you took your bulletin, here's just a couple of true lessons that exist that I want you to think about. How many of you have ever experienced conflict? All right? Nobody? Right? How many of you are ever like one of those people that you just think, you know what, I've had enough conflict that I can just handle no more, right? My cup overfloweth with conflict. Anybody ever had conflict? How many of you are married? Conflict, right? How many of you are somebody's child? Conflict, right? How many of you have children? Conflict, right? How many of you have a job? Conflict, right? How many of you have a boss? Conflict, right? Oh, hands didn't go up so quick that time, right? They're like, my boss goes to church here, I can't raise my hand. All right? I get it. I totally see how that works. Here's what I want you to know. Conflict is inevitable. It's a reality in life. Conflict is a thing, right? It just exists. It's a reality. It's something that we have. We all endure some sort of conflict at some point in our lives, one time or another, right? You with me? Yes. Conflict is also an occasion for grace. It's an occasion for grace. I want to tell you a quick story about the playground we built in Kenya. And a lot of you prayed before we left for our trip that God would provide this property that was necessary, and that God would soften the heart of the police chief, and that we would be able to build this playground on this particular piece of property. And this was our prayer, right? Because we knew that we were going to run into some challenges. Mary Kamau, who's the executive director for Missions of Hope International, she was here a couple of weeks before we were to depart, and she said, we still have not secured this property. And we knew that we needed this property, and she said, well, if we don't secure this property, we'll just tear down 4 classrooms and build it there. Well, for those on the team, especially those who are in education, they thought that would be the worst idea. We don't want to do that. All right? And so we prayed as a church, God, would you just go ahead of us, go ahead of our team? Would you work out this property situation? So the Friday before the majority of the team met, Mary Kamau went and met with this police chief who had the responsibility for this property. And he had already kind of been a little bit of a, I don't know, ornery maybe might be the word, right? He wasn't responding to emails. He was kind of being intimidating. He wasn't really being flexible and friendly. And so Mary just said, I'm going to approach him different. I'm going to kill him with kindness, so to speak. And so Mary shows up at his office on this Friday and says, listen, we've written you about this property. We've talked to you about this property. We really want to use this property to build a playground. And his first answer was no. No. Everybody wants to bribe me. They want to pay me for this property. And I've said no, so I'm keeping my word. Nobody's using it for anything. Well, Mary says, I don't think this is so much about the property. She says, we're talking about a playground, but I don't really believe that the problem here is a playground. And so she said to him, I believe the problem is your relationship with Jesus. However the conversation went, she wasn't afraid to go there, right? And she went there. And long story short, what happens is he says, fine, you can use this piece of property, you can build your playground, but do not tell anybody I gave you permission. Right? He just wants to kind of wash his hands of it and say, I didn't have anything to do with it, I don't know what they're doing, but whatever. Fast forward, full week. We show up Monday morning. We have tires, right? We're going to build this playground. We're going to build this playground out of all these old tires, and we start working on it. We've got the tires laid out. We're starting to drill holes and attach bolts and nuts and washers and screws to these tires so that we can build the first dome. And what happens is crowds start showing up all around us. And we're thinking, wow, look at this. We're making such an impact that people are coming to watch and see what we're doing. Oh, no. Oh, no. This was mostly what they call the youths. Well, the youths are these unofficial, official, I don't know for sure, elected people to represent little communities within the broader community. All right? And so you got to picture this for a moment. All right? Mountainview sits on a little more than 6 acres of property. This is about the size of the get-to-through community with 40,000 to 60,000 people living in it. All right? So picture 40 to 60,000 people living on Mountainview's property. All right? When you pull out today, just try to picture that in your head. And right in the middle of this property is this nice spread out land that is run and managed by the police chief. So we're there building a playground, and the youth start showing up, and they're not so impressed with what's happening. They start to gather around, and they start kind of pushing and shoving and telling us to move and leave. And as a matter of fact, one guy actually picks up a boulder, all right, a rock, and he is about ready to stone a guy named Moffat, all right? Because Moffat is one of the youths, but Moffat didn't tell the other youths about the plan. So they're all mad at Moffat. So literally digging a hole for this first dome. So they dig the hole, and then somebody comes in and says, don't dig the hole, and so they covered the hole. And then they said, no, it's okay, dig the hole, so they dug the hole. And then they said, we said no, and so they covered the hole. All right, this is all going on while we're trying to we're busy. We're building a playground, right? We're saving Africa with the playground. I mean, this is kind of what we're doing. It got so tense that eventually they had us go down to the school. And the youths demanded that Mary Kamau, the executive director, would come and have a conversation with them. Well, Mary Kamau decided that she didn't answer to them. And so she let it sit for a few hours. And while she let it sit, we sat for a few hours in a little tiny room with no airflow, and it was a little warm, all right? And so Mary, while she's letting this sit, she's gone now to the police chief and basically said, you can't hide. You need to come with me. She went to the village tribal leader and said, you need to come with me. And then she went to the official elected administrator of this community and said, you need to come with me. And they went to the school and they had a meeting, about 18 of them in the room. And Mary said these kind of things to them. She said, one, I don't answer to you. I answer to these three. As a matter of fact, you also should answer to these three because you don't answer to me. And so she kind of created some ground here. The police chief was able to say, this is my jurisdiction, this is my responsibility, and I said yes. Well, immediately they assumed that Mary had bribed him, given him some lump sum of money and all these other things, and basically Mary had to say, that's not what we do. We don't do that. That's not what we're about. Come to find out, the guy who had the rock and was going to throw it at Moffat, and really come to find out, he wasn't going to throw it, he was just trying to intimidate, right? Well, that worked for me. I was intimidated. I thought, you start getting rocks in your hand, you're going to throw them. I'm a little nervous, right? Come to find out, he's a parent with a kid in the school. And so she turned to him and said, you know better. This is not what we do. We don't bribe. We want to help kids. We're trying to change the lives of children. We don't do bribes. We don't pay people off. Well, that's not how we work. And so then the rest of the youths kind of laid on him too and said, you have embarrassed us. You have put us to shame in front of our guests and our community, right? They're trying to do a good thing, and look what you've done. Long story short, this conversation took about 2 hours. In the midst of this, a guy comes along. His name's Kevin. Kevin is running for political office. Kevin sees a conflict and he thinks, I can be a peace negotiator. And so he seizes the opportunity. Well, guess what? When he was 2 or 3 or 4 years old, Mary Kamau was his preschool teacher. So we've often thought, accident? Hard telling, right? So they meet for a couple of hours. We send some of the team off to go do some other work. And the next thing we know, they want us to build the playground, and they want us to build it right now. So about 5 of us go up the hill, right? And they dig the hole again. All right, this is the 3rd time the hole has been dug. We start trying to put together the engineer's gone, and the guy who helped build the one out on our playground gone. And so I didn't help build the playground, but now all of a sudden I'm now Alan's right-hand guy, which is not a good thing. And so we try to put this dome together. It gets about, what, 3/4 of the way done? Yeah, we get one there so that we can all gather around and have a picture with the youths, the officials, Mary, and a bunch of us with the peace sign, because God had delivered unity in the community. Here's what I know about this whole situation. It needed to happen. The conflict that we were in, it had to happen. Because now all of a sudden, this isn't just a Mountainview playground. It's not just a Missions of Hope International playground. It is a Get to Thuru community playground. And they're all unified about it. And they all think it's a good thing. And they have something in their community to be proud of. I didn't share this first service, but this is what the students said at the dedication of the playground. We will never forget about this day. They said, we will write this in our composition books for years to come. Because they'd never witnessed anything quite like it. And so listen to this verse. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 24, 25, and 26 says this, and the Lord's servant must not be quarrelsome, but kind to everyone, able to teach, patiently enduring evil, correcting his opponents with what? Gentleness. God may perhaps grant them repentance leading to a knowledge of the truth, and they may come to their senses and escape the snare of the devil after being captured by him to do his will. You know what? When it comes to conflict, this is what Mary did. Mary did it. She entered into the conflict. Not to knock heads, but with gentleness. with patience, knowing that this was something bigger that was happening. Maybe it was evil, maybe it was the movement of God. Regardless, God used it to produce something good. To produce something good. So here's two truths about conflict that I want you to take home with you today. First one is this. It's in the hardest times, and it's in the most difficult of discussions when we get to see God's light shine the brightest. Now hear that. How many of you are like me, and when you think of conflict, you think, I want to avoid it, I want to get away from it. I would pretend, we talk about the pink elephant in the room. Have you ever heard that analogy? How many of you are like, what pink elephant? Right? Like, I'm fine. Like, there could be 12 pink elephants in the room, and I'm pretending they're not there. Anybody like that? Yes, but here's the thing, it's in the midst of the conflict, it's in the midst of hard discussions that often we can see God's light shine the brightest. That's one of the truths that I want you to believe today. Here's the second one, that conflict is not something to avoid or pretend doesn't exist. Conflict is an opportunity for God's grace to be seen by all. Why was it so important to go up on this hill where this playground was going to be built and to have pictures taken with our hands making peace signs? Because this was a moment that everyone got to see. Everyone witnessed. What seemed impossible became reality. And so conflict is not something to avoid. It's something to enter into, not be afraid of, so that we can see God's grace given and it be seen by everybody. Do you hear me there? And so I want you to believe that, because conflict was something that I learned about this trip. It's something that I'm not going to forget, right? Enter into it. Don't be afraid. And if I come and talk to you, you know I learned it from Mary Kamau, because I'll say, well, it doesn't seem to be about that. Maybe it has to do with you and Jesus. All right? All right? Just know that could happen. So we accomplished really everything we set out to do. We went with 24 people. We came home with 24 people, which is always a good thing. Almost. And not all of them were able to be here today, but some of them are here. And Mountain View, this is what I want you to know. The reason we're reporting is because you did something. You did something. We had really three main projects. It was the refurbish of a guest house. Wallace and Mary Kamau lived here for 6 months, and we set them up a home. And they said, would you please come and help refurbish the home that's attached to our home? It's really a guest house where missionaries from all over the world come and stay and learn about their mission. And so she just wanted it to be like a really nice, warm, comfortable place. You all helped do that. Some of you made quilts. Some of you helped get items from IKEA from all over the globe. All right, thank you for that. Some of you prayed, right? Some of you did some things. The other thing we accomplished was our vacation Bible school. All right, with about 600 students. You're going to hear about that in a moment. And then the third thing that we did was this playground project, and you're going to hear a little bit more about that. If you give to Mountain View Christian Church at all, there's a little bit of money of every dollar given that goes into our missions fund. And part of those funds were used this year to accomplish these projects. So you were a part of it. You were a part of this, and I need you to know that, because lives were changed, and we pray every week for lives to be changed. Now, these team members, they all paid their own way, all right? They worked hard, they fundraised, they sacrificed. They did great work to fund their trip. The airfare, the accommodations, the safari, all of those things, they did on their own, but the projects were covered because of your generosity. So, let's hear from the first project. Debbie is up. Do we have the microphone? There. Oh. You got it.
You can see on the stream there that there's some rooms that look pretty naked, and they look pretty naked because they were stripped down before we got there and painted fresh. And one of the cool things about how this project came about was that when Mary and Wallace came in 2017 to take 6 months off and be here to just refresh, they stayed in a house that was rented just over here a few blocks, and it was refurbished by and furnished by Sarah Jules and Elizabeth Dewey and Pat Sherler. And yeah, and they didn't just get some beds in there and go and get a few dishes to make it all coordinated. They decorated the walls. They got some nice fabrics. It was beautiful. And when Mary came there and saw and felt for herself what it felt like for it to be a peaceful, beautiful place, she realized that the guest house she was providing at home for missionaries that also needed a refreshment was falling short. And she'd never been on that end of it before. And so she said to them, could you help me do that at home? And you give Pat and Elizabeth a chance to decorate, and they're all over that. So they talked with her, what do you want it to look like? How do you want it to feel? They came up with a plan, and then many, many people helped to execute that plan. And then our entire team had a work day, and we scrubbed that place from top to bottom. It was toothbrushes and brushes cleaning and grout and bleaching grout, and we worked really, really hard. And it looked really clean and sparkly, and then we went to work using all of the things that had been gathered. It was an awesome chance to put together a place that would be a refreshment for missionary groups that come in the future. And before we left Africa, Mary had already hosted a large group for dinner one night after we had it all finished. And they themselves had been there before, and now they saw the difference. And they said it was beautiful. And she was able to be pleased to know that it was something that blessed others. And so it was just really, really fun. See that kitchen right there? Oh my gosh, that was a really awful kitchen. We really had to go at it. But it was awesome, and you guys got to be a part of that. See that fireplace? Luke Scherler turned that fireplace into something special. It was the ugliest fireplace you've ever seen. So
it's been made by the same people that did the kitchen.
Yeah, it was really fun to be a part of it.
How many of you helped quilt or make one of the quilts that went over? I'm just curious. Raise your hands high so we can see you. That's very good. The other interesting thing about this is we filled at least 18 of the bags that needed to go, suitcases. All right, so we told everybody you get 2 suitcases on an international trip. One is for your stuff, and one of them is for the stuff for the guest house. It was the perfect amount, all right? Another thing we did was our Vacation Bible School, so Liz is going to talk about that.
So many of you are involved in the VBS we do here, and you know that it takes hundreds of people to put together a wonderful VBS. Well, in Africa, you do it with 10. So we had a wonderful time, and I have to say, this is not my first rodeo doing a VBS there, but this was one of my most fulfilling trips because there were some question marks going into it, and things just came together. We had 3 rotations, about 600 kids went through, so each class was done 15 times every day. So you did crafts 15 times, you read a story 15 times, you danced 15 times, so those dancers sweat bullets all day long for this, for the glory of God. It was wonderful. Drinking water. So many of you helped with the Lion Pillow project. Thank you for that. It was well received. We painted rocks. The kids loved painting rocks. And then on the last day, we had them paint things that were beautiful. They had to come up with what they thought was beauty, and they painted that. Our theme was who I am in Christ. I am strong, I am beautiful, I am loved. And we told the stories of Paul's conversion, Paul's escaping with friends' help in a basket, and Paul and Silas in jail. It was a wonderful experience, and Steve has some stories for you.
And I get to stand because I can't sit and talk. And I do this for you. Tom's plan is to refresh us after the end of this 5,000 foot, 90-degree weather, small, cramped quarters of classrooms to go on a wonderful safari. And when we're driving out through the Masai Mara, 525,000 acre game preserve, and the Maasai people are there, and they wear their, Zach and I have them today. This is their garb, have you? And they have their staves for herding their sheep and their goats and their cattle, and they jump up and down. And our driver, Jacob, when we asked him, he said they do that because they're happy. So we can be happy. All righty, to Vacation Bible School. How it affected me and how I really feel and know that it affected the community. And I like to play with words. I forgot this first service. To me, community means come in unity, community. And we saw this exemplified on the last day we were there with the school. We were there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for playground building, Vacation Bible School, dancing, and all. And Thursday was a tremendous celebration. Am I losing something? Oh, up on the screen. I thought maybe, I am wearing, I'm not like a Scotsman, I do have something on underneath. So anywho, at the Vacation Bible School, that last day of celebration, the community was invited, and hundreds of parents and individuals from around the area were present, and that is how the VBS was shared with them. And so one example I have, you may see through here, there's the little boy right there, he was holding a good-sized rock. We had visions, Liz, Marissa, my wife Marcia, had visions of painting like our small river rocks that are smooth, and you could put a nice paint on them, and you could paint, I am loved, and I am beautiful, like Liz was saying. But these are the rocks that we actually got. A little bigger. It's a beautiful quartz, actually, beautiful on its own, God's creation. But the kids were going to paint on them, but they had, a lot of no concept. They don't have TV. They probably don't have any magazines or newspaper. All they know is that area which they live in. So it was a part of our role to give them inspiration and give them thoughts. So my Marcia, I remember watching her painting a little flower on one of the rocks, showing the kids. And then the kids picked up their paintbrushes, and it became a conglomeration of every paint all mixed together on their hands, their uniforms, their faces. So that afternoon, as we're teaching the classes on Paul's conversion experience and so on, when the kids came through, I asked them to show me their rocks. I always wanted to share with them that my joy of seeing what they created. So I said, here's what Mr. Steve would like you to do, for the older kids anyway. I said, I'd like you to take this rock and think about it as your rock in Christ, your foundation in Christ. And you have this rock in your hand, and you are God's hands and his eyes and his ears and his feet and his shoulders and his emotions and his care. And I want you to put your rock in your pocket. And I want you to take it home and into your community. And when you do something that Jesus was doing to his folks and he encouraged us to do, if you show kindness or say a wonderful word or you encourage or you help someone, take your rock out, put it in your other hand, and put it in your other pocket. And then tomorrow, when you do the same thing, take it out, put it, and just keep it going, back and forth, back and forth. So the next day, the kids came through and I asked, how many of you have your rocks with you today? How many of you did an act of kindness? And one little girl, I was hoping her picture would show, but it isn't. And here's a little divine intervention. Her name was Purity. The most darling little girl, her hair all braided real tight and that, and she was so proud of her rock and she held it. And I praised her. I said, Purity got the message. She was the one sheep of the 99. She got it. And that message continued through the course of the week in all we learned about Paul. And on Celebration Day, the young men that were the class presidents of the 7th and 8th grade, as I recall, they penned a speech, And they even commented that how they painted rocks. We're going to paint rocks, but they loved their rocks, and they drew pictures, and they made the little comforting lion pillows. You know, courage, that's what we pulled out of that one. There's courage for you kids here, and you have this. But they shared this, and they shared their painting of their rocks, and all the folks heard that. And it was my hope that the children shared that with their parents and their families, that we talked about having this as something that we can grab onto. This was skin on Jesus to them. They put skin on him to be able to do their thing. So that's what Vacation Bible School did for me. Thank you.
I'm sure you can't imagine that if we came home with 23, which one we might have left behind, all right?
What was that?
Nothing at all. All right, especially when he learned the hopping thing, right? One of the greatest moments is they had never painted before in Get to Thuru. First time they had ever painted. And so you have these pre-unit kids using these paintbrushes, and they would just hold them with their hands like this. Well, you saw how close they are in the desks, so they're painting their neighbor's head because they're bumping into each other, literally paint all over their neighbor's head as they went out through the day. And then with the pre-unit, they didn't understand how much paint to use either, that you only need a little bit of paint. And so they had a lot of paint, and they'd put them in their hands, and they went to dance class, and they didn't want to put the rocks down. So they finally convinced them to put the rocks down, so they put the rocks down, but then the paint is literally all over their hands, all right? So then it was on their uniforms and on their hair and everything else. So Alan was our fearless leader with the Playground Project, and so we're going to hear from him about that part.
Hi, everybody. I'm Alan. I kind of have the leadership role on building the playground, but it really started with Pat and Wally Scherler. They came up with the concept over a year ago, and so I was just kind of in charge of executing their vision for what it should look like. We built, in November, our team built a version of the playground here on Mountain View's campus. If you haven't seen it, go over to the north playground area and you can see what we did back in November. And our goal was to work through it, make sure that we know what we're going to be able to do when we get to Africa. We knew that once we got to Africa, things would be more difficult. Tools were going to be harder to come by. Tires, we actually had to purchase tires. Anybody will give you tires in the United States. And in Kenya, they use tires for brakes on their carts, so you have to buy tires from them. The painting was a challenge. We didn't expect to start a near riot in the community, but that happened. And so one of the songs that we learned from the kids, we'll share with you now, kind of epitomizes the whole thing. So it's, who has the final say? Jehovah has the final say. So that's just a portion of the song, but it kind of epitomized our whole project. Jehovah has the final say. And he was going to get this project built regardless of who was there to do it, regardless of what the problems that we faced were. As long as we stayed faithful, the project would get done. And it did. And what's really cool about it, in my mind, is as you're watching these pictures, this place is beautiful. And I can tell you from firsthand knowledge, this is a dump. As we dug into the ground, it was old corn cobs and baby diapers and trash and burned up whatever. This is a dump, and that view is fantastic, that aerial view. They came in, they laid soil down for us. We painted the tires this bright yellow, bright red, bright purple. We laid sand in on all the tires so that the kids have a comfortable and a nicely finished place to play. It sits up on a hillside in the community, and it is beautiful. It stands out to everyone who looks across the valley and up the valley. They see this playground. And you guys helped us do that. You guys encouraged us. You guys provided the funds to buy the tires. We got some really awesome help from some Kenyan folks, and actually the Kenyan folks kind of drove the project towards the end. We were running out of steam. We were running out of juice. And we've got a young man named Jacob who shows up in one of these pictures. And Jacob was our man. He did everything that we could possibly need him to do, and really drove. There's Jacob and me, and Mofat, yeah. So it's just an encouragement that Kenyans wanted this to happen. They came together as a community group to make sure that it happened, and Jehovah had the final say.
I wrote in an all-church email a few weeks ago, if you got it, that I went up to John, who is the spiritual resource officer, is what he's called, the spiritual discipleship pastor. And I said to him, hey, you didn't have to throw such a party for us. It was on the final day. And he goes, huh? I was kind of kidding. I wasn't being that trite, right? But I was kind of saying, oh, wow, what a big party for us. He goes, oh, no. No, this is for God. I was like, oh, nice dose of humility, right? Right there for you? Like, what? Look what we did for you, you know what I mean? But that was what Alan's saying. It wasn't about that. It wasn't about who, it wasn't about what, it wasn't about where, it was all about God making something happen. And we needed to give him that celebration. So second service, guys, people get a little hangry, all right? So what I want to do is start down here, I guess, with Rowan. And, yeah, right there, Rowan. All right, and let's hear your one lesson that you took away from the trip.
So definitely happiness. If you look at the video and saw the kids' face, they had pure happiness. And every day we drove for where they live, and they had nothing. Looking at their homes made you want to cry. But every day they come to school with a big smile in their face, and you could see what God's doing in their heart. And it really gave me a different perspective on my faith and my worship.
My one thing is I was just really inspired by their excitement for Jesus and their faith in God. As she was saying, they're happy. They're just so excited to be there with what little they had, and just their faith in God. They didn't seem to have any fears of their future. They had huge dreams from where they were coming from, and it was just really inspiring about how strong their faith was.
This was my second trip, and 4 years ago, Zach and I started sponsoring 2 kids in the Gita Thuru School, and many of you are child sponsors, and one of the things that I now have is the ability to say that I got to meet those children. And this last trip, I was able to meet Lorento's mom and baby sister, and Lorento is right about Maggie's age, our middle daughter, and what she said to us was, thank you. For what you do, but what I really grasped was she had pride in that, because in Mohi, we partner with the parents. We partner with them so that their kids get the education that many kids in that valley never get to experience. And I will sponsor both those kids until they are past college, as far as we can, because to be able to say that I had a hand in their journeys and in what God is doing in their life, it means so much.
As with everybody else, I don't have just one word, but what came to me is a question that I kept asking over and over again, and that's, what's next? What's next, God? What do you want to show me next? What divinely incredible thing are you going to demonstrate for me next? And over again, he kept proving my expectations as being low. He did so much more. He brought things that were so much more beautiful, so much more impactful, so much more heartfelt. He changes everything. And what I came away with is I really want to live a faith that expects the absolute awesome from the creator of the universe.
My one thing is I just came home feeling very proud of the church that we got to represent. We talk a lot here about multi-generational and intergenerational, and obviously we have proved that. At the end of the day, we all needed each other, and we worked amazing together. And you had people who, we have the age range from 14 all the way up into their 70s, and it was a great picture of what we can do as a church when you allow God to work in you and through you. So I am proud to represent you guys. So be proud of yourselves. Be proud of how we're working together to raise up the next generations that are going to be changing the kingdom.
We live pretty frantic lives here, and everything is just go, here, there, event. But when you're in Africa, twice a day, you stop for some tea. Whether or not you drink tea, you stop for tea. And coming back, I've tried to implement those things because, you get in your mind that if you slow down, if you take breaks, you're not going to get nearly as much done. But on the contrary, you get more done because there's this piece of not worrying. And for Sirs Ellen, so Jacob, the guy who helped us, he cleaned tires, he moved water. He has a degree from university in electrical or mechanical engineering. He has a degree in mechanical engineering, and he worked with us for 4 days for a couple bucks. And just talking to him, he was not worried about anything. He wasn't worried about timing. He wasn't worried about what he wanted to do because he knew that God had a plan for him. And if we can just stop and slow down and just listen, God has a plan. That's what I took away from it.
Well, my wise young man behind me helped me capsulize what I said earlier. I came home with a new health condition. I came home with an enlarged heart. And I made a point at the end of every class, every 20 minutes, for 15 or 16 times a day, we had a different group of children. And when they would walk by, I'd station myself at the door of the little, probably 12 by 14 or 15 square room, and could have anywhere from 10 to 40 kids walking out. And I made a point to touch them, shake their hand, taught them a new one. Baked potato, French fry. Boom. They like that. But touch them, kiss them, and tell them that they were in my heart, because my heart has just keep growing to fill 560 of them into it.
I think the word that I come away with is awe-inspiring. Watching God lavish his love on those kids, on the people there, watching him change and transform each of us, it was an amazing experience. And the fact that he calls us to be a part of that and to give it out in what, not necessarily in Africa, but here as well, in the stories that he's writing and transforming people's lives, what a privilege. And faith, just amazing faith booster. So I would encourage any of you to be able to, who can go on this trip, to do it, or to get involved in some way for praying for these kids, these teachers over there that are doing this day after day. Anyway, I want to say thank you so much for all of your prayers. It really did feel really good representing all of you.
First, I wanted to add one little thing. It actually seemed like a big thing to me. Tom forgot it, but when he was talking to John about this big party and the tents and and John said, when you do it for God, you do it big. And they did it big. They have no money, but this was a big, big deal. So, my one word, sponsor. If you have an opportunity, you can give up a couple of lattes. $38 a month gives a kid 2 meals a day, a uniform, Christian education, secular education, and health care. Where else can you make $38 go that far? And the biggest thing is hope.
My word is encouragement. When you provide or encourage someone, it doesn't cost you anything. It's free, and it doesn't make you tired. It doesn't take muscle. It's just it's a gift. And we were asked to say what might have made, how did we think God used us when we were there? What difference did our presence there make? And encouragement was a big thing. It's hard for us to understand how some people coming around the world to where you are to see what you do is encouraging, but it's massive for them. And what the greatest thing was is that it was massive for us too. If they got half the encouragement that we did, how we learned that word, then it was worth it. And there's something that two of them said a lot. Mary Kamau says this all the time, and the director of the school says it all the time. She says, "God bless you so much." And it was such a favorite. I've never really been comfortable with trying to bless somebody by saying, "God bless you." I just don't feel comfortable with it. And I truthfully don't receive it that well when somebody says it to me. But when they say, "God bless you so much," it felt so personal. And it was a big encouragement.
On Sunday, we had the opportunity to go to a Kenyan church, which is very different than this. So a word of warning. But we had the opportunity to go on Women's Sunday, and there was one of the 3 sermons that day was a woman who her thought was, "You are not a question mark. God has a plan for you. You are not a question in his mind. You are a certainty. And I shouldn't consider myself a question mark. God has a plan for me. God has a plan for everybody in this room. God has a plan for everybody in the Mathare Valley, and it's a plan for good. And I walk away with knowing that God has a plan for me. I am not a question mark."
How many of you heard something today that encouraged you? Good, good. Here's the thing. I started with talking about conflict, right? Conflict. And a lot of times in the midst of our lives and in the midst of conflict, you know what we want? We want God to show up. And we want him to show up in big ways, don't we? And although this was our experience in Africa, I believe that God still does these things everywhere and in all of our lives. And so I'm just going to ask you right now, if you're in the midst of conflict in your life and you just want God to show up in big ways and work things out, would you raise your hand? Yeah. I just want to pray for you right now. Let me do that. God, thanks for the boldness and the courage and the vulnerability in the room to raise our hands and say, "God, we're in the midst of things. And I hear these stories in Africa, and I hear these stories from other people, but I want that to be my story." Where, God, you come in and you work things out. Your light shines so bright that you work things out and you get honored, you get glorified, and God, you show up in really big ways, in so many big ways that we have to give you the credit for it. Because, God, we're not able to do these things on our own. So, God, I don't know what people are facing this week. I don't know the struggles that they're facing. I don't know the difficulties that they're in the midst of, but I know this. You are God today, and you are God yesterday, and you are God tomorrow, and you're the same God here as you are the same God in Africa as you are in Mexico and everywhere else. And God, we just want you, we give you the freedom. We give you the freedom to work in our lives and to show up big. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. We are, our ushers are back there, and we're going to collect our offering. And what I'd like to do today is I'd like you just to thank God. Today I'm changing it up on you just a little bit, all right? When you grab the wooden handle, will you thank God today for using the money that's been given to make a difference with our partnerships in Kenya? Will you thank him for that as those come by? And then just, if you would, right, long prayer, God, would you continue to do great things? All right, I know that some of you are eager to go. All right, we'll be going again in 2021. All right, February, plan on it. All right, if these guys can do it, all right, and Dick is really going to be our new spokesman. All right, so if you think you can't, if you need to know about Sponsor a Child, I mean, you're gonna hear a lot from Dick this year. All right, because it's a great experience. So. Ushers, go ahead and pass the offering bags. And Craig, why don't you come on down and close us out And you guys can.
Tom, can we
do a big wow for the...
Yeah, do a big wow, right? All right, while the offering bags are going.